Tumami Dishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Sudhi Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. So we are beginning a discussion on this very unique Vedantic text, Vivekachudamani. In English we call it the Crest jewel of wisdom. A few things about this Vedantic text. Technically it is called a Prakarana Grantha in Sanskrit, which means a kind of introductory work, introducing Vedanta philosophy, Vedantic way of life, and the uniqueness of this book is it gives you a very comprehensive idea of Vedanta philosophy and also Vedanta tradition. Many practical aspects of our spiritual life are discussed. For example, how to approach a text and how to learn a text from a teacher, and what are the primary qualifications for an ideal student, an ideal teacher, and how to prepare our mind to approach this unique text, and the nature of human mind, the nature of our senses, how our mind reacts to different experiences from outside and also from within, how to concentrate and how to slowly evolve in spiritual life. So philosophy as well as practical application of that philosophy in our life are given equal importance in this text. So I shall just begin today, and eventually we will understand the uniqueness of the text. There are altogether 584 verses in this text, and in some versions of Vivekachudamani you find 585 verses. Some minor differences, it's called different versions. The book deals with a very interesting subject. How lucky we all of us are, because we are born as human beings. That is the uniqueness of the book. How wonderful it is to be born a human being. Now in Hindu tradition, to be born as an angel is a burden, and to be born as an animal also, of course, obviously not a very pleasant experience. To be liberated from the cycle of life, to realize our Atman, our true nature, we have to be born as a human being. If we are born as an angel, it's called Devas and Devatas in Hindu tradition. So I am using the equivalent in other traditions. It's called Devas and Devatas. They are all celestial beings living in the high heavens. They don't have a very high spiritual stature, but they are good people, good beings. Normally they help human beings, but one problem is, even for them to realize their true nature, they have to be born as human beings. If they live in heavens, they cannot attain their true nature. They cannot realize Atman. So in order to practice spirituality, in order to practice meditation, japa, contemplation, prayers, they had to be born as human beings. So, the first topic discussed is the glory of human life, the glory of human birth. Before Shankaracharya, the author, takes up that subject, he invokes the blessings of his own teacher. Shankaracharya's teacher was Govinda Bhagavad Pada. Teacher means he lived with Govinda Bhagavad Pada only for maybe 1 year or 2 years. He was a small little boy of 7 years old, less than 7 years, when he started his journey in search of his Guru. He walked about 1200 miles, maybe slightly 1500 miles he must have walked, and reached the banks of river Narmada in today's Madhya Pradesh near Indore, where he met his Guru, who was sitting immersed in meditation inside a cave, a mountain cave. And when he reached there, his teacher, he felt that his teacher was waiting for him. His teacher didn't live very long after that. His teacher was waiting for an ideal disciple whom he can teach the Vedanta philosophy. And Shankaracharya stayed there for less than 2 years and studied all these scriptures, and his Guru passed away. Before that, of course, he had already mastered all the Vedas, all these Upanishads, Gita, all the Shastras. He had already mastered when he was a tiny little child. Then only he started his journey with the blessings of his mother. So I won't go into those details, but you have to remember the first verse in this text is Guru Vandana, means invocation, the blessings of his teacher. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tab Agocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranadosmi Aham. This is the first statement he makes, Aham Pranadosmi, I bow down, I invoke the blessings of my teacher, I bow down before my teacher. I pay my homage to my teacher. And the teacher's name is Govinda, Govinda Bhagavad Pada. That was the teacher's name. He was sitting immersed in meditation inside a mountain cave. And there is an interesting story behind how Shankaracharya, looking for his teacher, happened to appear before his Guru. The story is something like this. He had already walked 1500 miles from his home in the southwestern tip of India called Kerala. And then when he reached the river Narmada was in floods, and his teacher was living, meditating. He was actually sitting immersed in meditation inside a tiny cave, mountain cave, on the banks of this river Narmada. It's a very broad river, very almost in those places it is as broad as Ganga, even broader in some places. So, the river was in floods and people were running away, they were looking for shelter. Many saints and sages meditating on the banks of river Narmada were looking for a place for shelter. Even now, if you ever happen to visit India, if you go to a place called Amarkantak, it is in Madhya Pradesh, near Indore, you find river Narmada. So it is very often saints and sages and also householder devotees, they consider it is a great blessing to go around these banks of river Narmada. They go around, they walk maybe for several hundreds of miles. They walk, it is called Narmada Parikrama, means going around the river Narmada. It's all forest regions. It is considered to be a holy pilgrimage. Even now it continues. Even now if you go there, you find people, householders, monks, sages, ascetics walking along the banks of river Narmada, which they consider to be the most sacred pilgrimage you can undertake after the pilgrimage to Badrinath, Kedarnath, the Himalayan pilgrim centers. It is called going around the river Narmada. It's called Narmada Parikramanam. It is called. So that's the glory, the holy tradition of this river. It was in floods. So the little boy Shankara reached there, and he was born with tremendous spiritual powers, divine powers. He had a kamandalu. Kamandalu is a small, tiny vessel ascetics normally use when they go on a pilgrimage. He had a tiny kamandalu. He was doing japa, meditation, all these right from his infancy with this kamandalu. So the kamandalu had assumed tremendous spiritual power because it was association. So what he did, the story goes, he put the kamandalu close to the river bank when it was overflowing. So all the river water got absorbed within the kamandalu. And it is said that Shankaracharya could absorb all the spiritual wisdom within his mind, and he could expand it as a flooded river. He could expand it to the big ocean, and the ocean can be condensed inside a tiny vessel, and the vessel can be expanded. The water in a vessel can be expanded into mighty ocean. So the whole flooded waters were absorbed in his tiny kamandalu, the small little vessel he was holding in his hands. Then the sage suddenly opened his eyes. Some divine person has descended on this region. That's why the floods have stopped. So he looked for, and he found Shankara was standing in front of him. That's how it all began. And he stayed there for less than 1.5 years. And during that time he studied here. It means Govinda Bhagavapada transferred the power and the tradition and the responsibility of teaching the world to Shankaracharya, the little boy, and he passed away. And Shankaracharya wrote many books. He traveled all over India 4 times. He founded 4 monasteries. He founded 10 monastic orders. He installed hundreds of temples. He wrote the most exquisite, the most beautiful, the grandest devotional poetry in Sanskrit, invoking all deities. Even today, the puja tradition we follow originally was started by Shankaracharya. The mantras to be uttered, Swaha, Swatha, all this. It all started by Puja Paddhati, the methods of doing puja. So he was the most astounding idealistic philosopher, Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism, and he also wrote the most exquisite poetry, prayers, hymns, which anyone can use to pray to their own chosen deities. Subramanya Bhujangam, Shiva Bhujangam, Shiva Bhradakshmavana Stotra, Devya Bhradakshmavana Stotra. You find his invocations, his prayers, his hymns addressed to all different deities you find in Shankaracharya's tradition. So, apart from being the greatest philosopher India has seen, and the greatest devotional poet, and maybe the first and greatest spiritual reformer, because before Shankaracharya, practically we did not have any Vedanta tradition. Vedanta philosophy was already there, spread all over the huge Vedic literature. For example, the Upanishad mantras which Swamiji brought in 19th century and spread all over the world, expounding Vedanta philosophy. These mantras did not have this philosophical implication before Shankaracharya wrote commentaries on the Upanishads. Bhagavad Gita, we won't be reading Bhagavad Gita today if Shankaracharya had not written a commentary on it, because it got this spiritual meaning because of his commentary. So, and also Brahma Sutras, Prasthanatraya, triple foundations. interpretations of the Upanishads, the Vedantic texts, and the logical dimensions of Vedanta philosophy called Brahma Sutras and Bhagavad Gita, plus innumerable introductory works to Vedanta philosophy, explaining the philosophy, the teachings, and also how we can practice those Vedanta ideas in our own life, how to start our own life. So, these introductory books are called Prakarana Granthas, and Vivekachudamani is unique among those introductory books. There are many other books also. Tattva Bodha is a very small book, Atma Bodha. There are many. Many of them just give definitions. Many of them may give expanded interpretations of the metaphysics of Vedanta, but Vivekachudamani gives you not only the philosophy, but also the practical method of applying this philosophy in our own daily life. So it is in the form of a dialogue between the teacher and the student. The student asks many questions. How to approach the text, how to approach spiritual subject, how to pray, how to meditate, and so on. And the teacher gives answers. So, the first is invocation. I bow down before the great teacher, Govinda Bhagavad-pada, who is one with Brahman. Brahman, the absolute reality, Atman, can be known only through Vedantic texts. It is beyond definition. It can only be understood as experience, through experience. It is in the form of the all-pervading, omnipresent reality, Brahman, and that Brahman manifests in our own hearts as the indweller. And the teacher whom I bow down to is one who has realized this truth. He is not a student of Vedanta, he has become one with Vedanta. When you realize Brahman, you realize the fact that the reality you are seeking is non-distinct, non-different from yourself. It resides in our own hearts as the indweller. So my teacher is one who has realized this truth. That is the meaning of the first verse. The second verse is, as I mentioned, begins with a praise for those who have the good fortune to be born as human beings. That's the idea behind it. So why it is so unique? So that's what we are going to discuss now. It is very important, maybe one of the most important verses of this text, not because of its philosophical significance, but because it tells you the importance of our human life. Human life, its real meaning to us depends upon how we interpret it. This human body, for example, on the one hand, it is a sublime instrument in our hands. We can use it for the best purposes. Human body, human intellect, human mind, energy, all the energy resources become a blessing to us when we give them a proper spiritual diversion, the spiritual orientation. They become a liability for us when we do not take care to give our own energy resources a spiritual diversion. They can be a terrible problem for us. So, how we must use these unique blessings of human birth. Jantūnām nara janma durlabham adapumstum tado viprada tasmāt vaidika dharma marga parada vidduttum अस्मात् परम आत्मानात्म विवेचनम स्वनुभवो ब्रह्मात्मना संस्थितिः मुक्तिर्नो शतकोटि जन्म कृतैः पुण्यर्विना लभ्यते. So, The essence of the meaning is, this human birth, you won't get this human birth unless you have done some very wonderful deeds in your previous life. Being born as a human being with a spiritual inclination, with a spiritual temperament, is a greater blessing. So, to be born as a human being is a very wonderful thing. To be born as a human being with a tendency, with a temperament, with an attitude, with a mind that helps us to divert our attention to spiritual subjects, it is not very, very common. You can just imagine how lucky we are actually. Many people open their eyes, realize the truth when they get some hard blows in their life. It is called fate or destiny catching you by the throat, giving you a shake or two, and throw it a gutter. Then we realize, but very often will be too late. So those who can divert their attention to spiritual life, even when they are still healthy, even still they have time to read holy scriptures, to think of holy subjects, and to engage in prayer, spiritual practices. Before it is too late, it is a unique blessing. It comes only as a result of God's grace and also as a result of some wonderful deeds we have done in our life. So that's why there are so many millions of species in the world. Among them, Narajanma means being born as a human being. It is very, very rare. And among not only that, Tato Viprata. Viprata should be understood. Vipra, Veda Dhenat Vipra means someone who's a tendency, skill or ability to read Vedanta scriptures. Now Vedanta scriptures should be interpreted with the broader meaning. The willingness, the patience to read books that talk about, that discuss higher spiritual values. So that should be the meaning given to Vedanta scriptures. So Vedanta literally means the end of knowledge, the culmination of spirit or intellectual endeavor, the essence of knowledge. That's the meaning of the Vidhatu, from which the word Veda comes. So Veda or Vedanta should not be understood in its narrow sense, narrow meaning, as a particular text or a book. Anyone who can sit in solitude and think of higher spiritual life, higher significance of human existence, he is actually interested, or he or she is interested in Vedanta. So, to be born as a human being and who has the patience and the tendency, interest in Vedantic scriptures, Vedantic contemplation, it is still more rare. Normally, unless we have some positive tendencies, samskaras in our mind, you won't be able to withstand listening to Vedanta, because there is no entertainment in this. Very often, people, normally we take an active interest in things that flatter our senses, that appeal to our senses. You don't have to work very hard to be interested in 49ers football or any of the ordinary sports things, because they appeal to our senses. So we often forget. People can watch these things, games, external things, for any number of hours with full concentration. So they have great power of concentration. You ask them to listen to some higher spiritual ideas, maybe they feel restless. They want to jump, they want to be elsewhere. Then how to be interested in Vedanta unless we have inherited from previous life. Some good spiritual samskaras, we won't be able to withstand this experience of listening to higher spiritual ideas. That is a psychological fact. So, to feel at home when Vedanta is discussed. In fact, people may like if you little masala if you add some, like tea, this masala tea. To be able to drink black tea without sugar and milk is not easy. But the same tea with masala, sugar, little honey is wonderful. There you are not drinking tea, you are drinking payas actually. So really speaking, to listen to pure Vedanta, it takes a lot of effort. And effort not in this life. Even if you have done that effort in previous life, whatever we do, whatever good actions, spiritual practices we do, they become subtle samskaras and they remain in our mental system. They are not lost. If we pray once upon a time, that prayer, sincere reading of scriptures, sincere discussion of spiritual topics, it will create a samskara, a residual element, a vritti is called, and remain in our mind. And it will manifest maybe after thousands of years, after several cycles of life. When you suddenly get connected to some Vedantic ideal, these accumulated samskaras will come to the surface and they connect. So, they help us to continue interest in spiritual subjects. So that's why Shankaracharya says, to be born as human beings, and to be born as human beings with an interest in spiritual life, spiritual values, it is very, very rare. And then, after being born as human beings with a lot of interest in spiritual life, then getting an opportunity and making use of that opportunity to study Vedantic ideas, that is still more rare. And then some people, of course, they are born with interests, they study for some time and they have deeply interested. That is actually a great thing because that will take them forward, if not in this life, in next life. That's why you are never late, and whatever we do is never lost. Now, the author says, not only that, the ability to contemplate, what is called mananam, to contemplate, to think seriously of the meaning of Vedanta scriptures, so that these ideas become part of our nature, part of our thinking pattern, that is still more rare. And then finally, after long contemplation and meditation and proper discrimination, acquiring this spiritual wisdom, to reach experience through spiritual practices, and after getting that experience, to remain in that spiritual consciousness, it is still more rare. Now, this human life, with all these blessings, you cannot get unless you have done a lot of good deeds, meritorious deeds, punyas, for many, many life cycles. As a result, as a reward for all these, we are born as human beings with a strong inherent interest in spiritual life. That's even our professional life. Maybe working as a CEO in a company, doing business, maybe doing things which are obviously not visibly linked to spiritual topic. Still, an interest in spiritual life and an ability to spend some time thinking, contemplation on these spiritual ideas, it gives us great sense of consolation, peace and happiness. Because suddenly we realize that we have something higher than these empirical worldly achievements to look for. So Shankaracharya says, without a good store of meritorious deeds in the past, because the spiritual bank, we cannot be born as human beings with all these qualifications. That's what Bhashyadara says. If you got anything to ask, you can ask now or later. Of course, we have another interaction. I want to discuss some of these topics with verses, and you can always ask questions. Now, the next verse is even more important. It is also one of the most famous verses of this text. Here, Shankaracharya says, the author says, there are three important elements, three important blessings which are possible only by the grace of God, which are three gifts from God. And they are related to the previous verse, of course. Durlabham trayameveda daivanugrahagetugam manishuttam mumukshuttam mahapurusha samsaya. Durlabham trayameveda. These three aspects, three blessings. What are they? To be born as a human being, and again, along with that, with a desire to look for liberation. Liberation, what is liberation? Normally, we are going through this wheel of birth, life, death and rebirth. It's a mechanical wheel. We are born, then we go through different experiences, happy and unhappy experiences. When happy experiences occur, we become happy. When unhappy things happen, we become unhappy. So, this is human life. Now, due to the power of some good previous samskaras, good actions done in the past, what happens? We feel a desire to get out of this. Enough of this. Let me go to either some retreat or some meditation or read some higher books. Even to have an interest to go to Olima men retreat house and women retreat house and spend some time, we may read some good books at least once a while. For that, you need a strong desire. Enough of this. Very often people may not be able to say no to their own desires. They may be able to say no to everyone, but not to themselves. So the ability to say enough or the ability to say no to their own mental desires, worldly desires, is the first step in spiritual life. Now that is called a mumukshutva, desire for liberation, desire to come out of this wheel of cyclic existence of birth, life, death, rebirth and discontinuing cycle. Because you cannot, if you go on rotating along with the wheel, you cannot come out of it. So one should be able to say no, then you come out of this wheel. So it's called mumukshutva, desire, an intense desire. It's not a wish, but a real feeling. Elsewhere, the author says, there are two types of people. There are those who need some hard blows on their head to say enough. And there are those who are born with this wisdom. The intelligent people will at least read the writings on the wall when some unpleasant things happen. Even when you go working hard for somebody whom you love, whom you like, from whom you expect, and that person suddenly turns against you, you get the opposite response. You expect some positive response, gratitude or help and mutual cooperation. But you not only get that, you get the opposite of it. Then the wise person will realize, he will read the writings on the wall. This is the nature of the world. So there should be a higher meaning in life. 2 plus 2 is not always 4 in life. It may be always is 4 in mathematics, not in life. What we do, we don't always get the expected result. So that could perhaps prompt a person to say, enough of this. Let me look for some higher meaning in life, higher transcendental meaning in life. Then you are looking for a way to get out of this wheel of samsara. And there are those who are born with it. And Sri Ramakrishna, in his own unique style, giving an illustration, he says, fisherman catching fish. There are different, fish also belong to different categories, different classes and groups. There are some fish who are clever enough, they were never caught. Whenever they see a movement of the nets underneath, they move away. So the fisherman won't be able to catch them. So Sri Ramakrishna says they are never caught. They are nitya muktas. So he says some of these great eminent monks, his own disciples, and they are never caught. They are so spiritually shrewd that they cannot be caught. Then there are some fish who are caught. They fall within the nets, but suddenly they realize, well, it's not such a pleasant experience. They smell danger, so they jump out of the net. So they are the people, they are like spiritual sadhakas, spiritual aspirants, who realize this is not a very pleasant situation. You may be bound by a chain, but a chain may be made of gold, but you can't move. So that bondage, that situation is not better than if you're bound by iron chains. It makes no difference. You can't move. So you try to get out of this. Then there is another category. They are caught, these fish are caught, and they think this is the most wonderful situation. Very happy. They don't know that they will be killed and eaten in a matter of minutes or hours. Still they think, oh, see how wonderful life is. It's only short-lived. Now, so Nimuktas, Nitya Baddhas, they are always within the bondage. So here, Shankaracharya says that there are 3 unique blessings. One is being born as a human being, and being born as a human being plus the desire for liberation. And then Mahapurusha Samsaya. Mahapurusha here means other spiritual seekers, advanced spiritual seekers. Now in spiritual life, the most important factor for our own spiritual advancement is the company of people with same type of spiritual aspirations. That's very important because human mind transmits values and culture. If we live with people who are spiritually inclined, more or less, to some extent at least, the close proximity transmits spiritual culture, spiritual values. So, Mahapurusha Samsaya means association of holy company, or holy association. So that's very, very important. We may not be always able to live in the company of holy persons, men or holy women, holy sages, holy men or holy women. May not be always possible. But once in a while, when we go to a temple or a church or any spiritual place where you are likely to meet people who may talk to you about higher life, suddenly you get an opportunity to turn your mind back to these higher values. Because association with higher people, higher in the sense holy, spiritually inclined people, will prompt you to turn your own attention, oh, there are these higher things in life. So it becomes a great help in spirituality. It is very, very, very important. Higher holy association can have an extended meaning. If you read holy books, That's also a holy association. If you read Bhagavad Gita, you are in the company of Sri Krishna. If you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you are in the company of Sri Ramakrishna. If you read the life stories of great sages and saints, you are in their company. So that also helps us. So not only direct physical proximity, living in the company of holy men and holy women, it also extends beyond that immediate meaning, interpretation, reading holy scriptures. And when you contemplate on what you read about, then the ideas go deeper. Actually, our mind doesn't retain ideas unless we think, we contemplate. It's called mananam. So, we may read. When we read, we actually hear those sounds. You may know that that's called, the word is called sravanam. Sravanam literally means hearing. You know why that? So even reading is like hearing. When you read a holy book, you are actually mentally hearing those words. It happens simultaneously. So the word used is sravanam. It includes reading also. Reading helps us, no doubt, but reading without contemplation, thinking, very often doesn't help us to go deeper into it. In fact, it becomes a samskara, it becomes a deeper, it gives a deeper meaning. It registers a memory or impression in our mental system only when we contemplate or think of what we read. Then it goes deeper. That's very, very important. Great spiritual teachers great spiritual aspirants are able to remember a lot of spiritual verses, because when they read, the mananam, contemplation, is also taking place simultaneously. That's why what you read is retained. So, what is important is reading scriptures with mananam or contemplation is also Mahapurusha Samsraya. It is also holy company. Sitting in solitude, contemplating the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, Vivekachudamani, Shankaracharya, Jesus Christ, Buddha, any of these great spiritual teachers. When you think deeply, you are in their company. You know why? Actually, these spiritual seekers, spiritual teachers, when they lived in this world, they practiced, they meditated. When they meditate, this meditation generates vibrations. Those vibrations are not lost. Physically, they have vanished. They died away long back. But the spiritual vibrations they generated by their work and meditation, they are still all over the place. When our mind is tuned to them, those vibrations connect and we are able to connect with those vibrations. It's just radio waves themselves. That's what happens. That's why when you go to a holy place, and after going to a holy place, when you think of the holy association of the place, those thought waves, when these waves, immediately they connect with our mental system. That's why we are able to meditate, go deeper. One example I can give, I can say, the old temple in San Francisco, for example. I can give a very interesting example. It is something anyone can experience if you want. See, formerly our shrine was, unfortunately for many years, it was located close to the restroom. Recently, I changed the shrine to the room where actually Swami Tunadidanji was living and meditating. And Ashokanji also lived there after some time. When they changed the shrine, the whole atmosphere changed. Because those, actually, during the construction time, the whole building, actually the roof was completely transformed. Everything, all these wooden things were all removed actually. We rebuilt the whole thing. None of those old furnitures or materials remain. They are all replaced. The vibrations are there. We go to Old Temple Hall where Swami Tunadi Dayanandaji used to preach, meditate, do puja. In the hall, big hall, you find like vibrations. The building is new now, right now. Rebuilt exactly as it was. But all the materials, building materials are new. The vibrations remain the same. If we go to Jerusalem, if we go to Kashi, the most ancient city of India, at least 7,000 years old or 8,000 years old city, you can see the vibration. If we go to the Himalayas, Badrinath, Kedarnath, associated with sages and saints for thousands of years, you can see that atmosphere. If you go to Bodh Gaya, the place where Buddha sat for meditation, if you need not be a Buddhist, if you are a spiritual seeker, you can see the strong living vibrations of Buddha. So what does it mean? The thought vibrations of great saints and sages will remain, they can never be destroyed. When you are a spiritual seeker, what you are happening, you are switching on radio and the waves falling and you connect with that. That's all. So Mahapurusha Samsaya. But Mahapurusha Samsaya never happens unless you are Mumukshutva. Mumukshutva means intense desire for liberation. Intense desire for spiritual realization. An intense desire to have a peep into our own transcendental nature. Once this is there, then you look for places, events, books, ideas, and also spiritual teachers, and then you will be looking for them. And when you look for them, these ideas suddenly come back to you. This is the uniqueness of spiritual tradition. Mahapurusha Samsaya. That's why it is said, Ishvara Nigriha Deva Pumsam Advaita Vasana Mahabhaya Krutatrana Dutranam Yadi Jayate. See, to have an interest in Advaita, non-dualistic philosophy, it's not easy. It is only a rare blessings of God. Because in non-Advaitic traditions, you pray to God and you are looking for something and God gives you that. In Advaita tradition, you are trying to understand your own nature. Therefore, it is a unique blessing from God. So, being born as a human being, and being born as a human being with a strong spiritual inclination for spiritual liberation, and also with all that, an opportunity to associate with spiritual personalities, holy company. All these three together come only as a result of special blessings of God. That's the implication. Okay, the fourth verse is important because here Shankaracharya, these three verses are very important. The fourth one I shall, it involves a little scolding. Very pleasant scolding. He's like a grandfather scolding a tiny child, or grandfather scolding another old man of his own age who eats a lot of sugar and jalebis and all this food which may not be healthy for him. So another old man says, you don't eat those things, are bad for you. To give up that, unless you want to die sooner. So that kind of a scolding you find in the fourth verse is important, and after that I would skip a few verses. Labdhva kadanjit narajanma durlabam tatravi pumstam sudivara darsanam yastu atma muktena yatadeja mudadihi sa atmahaswam vinihanti asadgrahat. He says, this is a slight scolding. There are people who are born as human he got human birth. And then they got opportunities to study scriptures. And also, they also get an opportunity, if they try, to have holy association. And they also get an opportunity to do spiritual practices. Still, they don't turn their mind in that direction. That person is highly deluded. That's the meaning. It's a very, very mild scolding. But coming from a great teacher, it becomes very serious. So persons who are endowed with all the blessings of secular life, let us say in modern times, put in modern language, you have got a wonderful job, plenty of money, wonderful children who are obedient to you, they are all well educated and employed, so you don't need anything, and you have Vedanta society or your temple or any holy place nearby, and wonderful programs going on. It will be a big blessing to any spiritual seeker. Still, no, I won't care for that. Such a person is not a very, so Shankaracharya has some uncomplimentary words to say about them. He said, Mudadhi. Muda means, Mudadhi, the literal meaning will be a fool. In fact, Moni Williams and others will give the simple primary meaning of fool. But Mudadhi, thi means intellect. Mudha means, deluded. What is delusion? A fool is the simple meaning, primary meaning, which is not what Shankaracharya means, of course. The meaning is, with all these wonderful opportunities, there are many. A wonderful job, wonderful, a very good education, and they may have also read some scriptures enough to understand the meaning of some, at least intellectually, and close proximity to spiritual seekers in places, in holy places, and there is enough scope for holy company also. The temple or the place of meditation may be within 1 block or 2 blocks, so they would turn in that direction and spending all their lifetime in worldly pleasures. Such a person is highly deluded. But this delusion is the wrong notion that people mostly suffer from. What's the wrong notion? This world is the only thing to be cared for. Human life is meant for worldly pleasures, nothing more. We need not worry about any spiritual values, ethical values, God or religion or anything. Human life is meant for enjoyment. This attitude is delusion. And such people, we explained earlier, are deluded by these wrong notions. That's the meaning. So now we will just okay, now we are going to 11th verse. Those who are interested, we have a book with them, they can look at the 11th verse. 11th verse, it tells you about the importance of proper contemplation, spiritual wisdom. 11th verse. Chittasya shuddhiye karma natu vastupalabdhi vastu siddhi vicharena na kinjit karma kodibhi. The literal meaning is this: action, contemplation. It won't take you, action without contemplation, action with attachment and desire, action just for secular prosperity will not take you to the highest spiritual realization. The highest spiritual realization is possible only by inner realization of the ultimate truth. Now, the real purpose of action is purity of mind. All these ideas are included here. Now, come to the subject. What is action? Action could mean, in a broader sense, action could mean physical action, mental action. Thought is a mental action. Physical actions ideas, all these are actions. If these actions are guided by a desire for the results of those actions, they just make you rotate along this wheel of cyclic existence. Birth, life, rebirth, and going on rotating without moving 1 inch forward in our spiritual life. Because all that we accumulate through our own effort, efficiency, enthusiasm, all this will vanish the moment this body falls. And again, you are born again, you have to begin your efforts again to build up this secular prosperity. So, action by itself doesn't take you anywhere in spiritual life. Action without desire has a purpose, a constructive purpose. It helps us to attain purity of mind. How this happens is, I shall try to explain. Normally, as I mentioned, every action done with a desire will produce its residual effect in our mind, and it will increase the desire. Like fire will burn much more if you pour oil or ghee or butter into it. It will not. You cannot put out fire by pouring oil in it. So you cannot put out a desire by doing more and more things for fulfilling those desires. It will go on expanding. There is no end. The wheel goes on rotating. Now, the same actions done without any desire as an offering to God or for the good of others, it helps us to advance in spiritual life, because actions done without desire doesn't produce any residual effect. Not only that, our natural tendencies, desires, all these would be emptied, will be removed by actions done without any desire. So persons who go on doing some noble deed without any desire, slowly he will reach a point where he will not have any more desire. So his mind becomes pure. At that stage, he will be looking for spiritual liberation. Now, what's the meaning of life? Because he is not interested in anything. He has transcended that stage. So you find this happening in the life of many devotees. I have found this happening. People who have succeeded a lot, have done a lot of unselfish actions, they naturally develop a strong desire for higher values. No more interest, this is all fine. No, I look for something higher. This actually happens in spiritual life. When you read in Shankaracharya's verses written, say, 1200 years back, you may think it's just an idea. But you can see this literally happening in the lives of spiritual seekers. Those who have worked very hard to build up their secular life, family, professions. And also, I have done a lot of work for spiritual purposes, spiritual, with under societies or without any selfish desire. Slowly they reach a point where they have no more desire. They only want to know some higher spiritual values. They want to know the meaning of human life and existence. This is actually a graduation from one stage to another stage. So at this stage, what's the meaning of life? No, it's all enough. Let me think of something higher. It is called mumukshutvam. It is called the desire for liberation. That's what it is. So you find this, those who have done a lot of unselfish deeds for others, for noble causes, without any selfish motive, they reach a point of mental purity There are no more selfish desires left in the mental system, and they think, well, no, what's meaning of life? Because there is nothing else to be bothered about. They want to think of higher things. So Shankaracharya says, Chittasya Shuddhaye karma natu astu balabdhe. So mind becomes pure. When mind becomes pure, what happens? Tattva bodha. There is desire for liberation and desire to study Vedanta philosophy, desire to understand Vedanta philosophy, and decide to contemplate on the meaning of Vedanta philosophy. This naturally happens. Gradual evolution of spiritual life happens. So we'll continue this discussion in the next session tomorrow. Now we can have interaction for half an hour, I think. Okay. We can have interaction. We have just 30 minutes actually.
Sorry, when you said action without desire, right? So desire can be of two kinds for behind any action. One is to achieve a goal, other is to get benefit from that achievement, the self benefit. So both should be avoided, or one of them should be?
Well, if a person is doing hard work for achieving a goal and also to be benefited by achieving that goal, both are the same. So far the binding effect is considered as the same. On the other hand, even secular responsibilities can be done without this problem. Well, I'm an householder. People think that somebody thinks he is an householder. He has do a job, is part of his duty, but life has got a higher meaning. Then this won't bind you. Because such a person, once they achieve the goals of the secular life, they won't be bound by that. Then their priority will change. Set of priorities will change. In spiritual life, in actual practice, changing of priorities, that's all. Reprioritization. Everyone has his own or her own priorities. Your priority depends upon what you consider to be the ultimate meaning of your life, goal of your life. Even people who are working in let's say in Wall Street, you have to worry about the fluctuation of market, stocks, and every moment. Such persons also, if they realize, well, money will come and go. In fact, that itself, the Wall Street can be a great university for studying Advaita. Because it tells you nothing remains permanent. Everything changes. This world itself can become a great teacher if we have the right perspective to look at the world and interpret the world. Or the nature itself is a great educator, really speaking. If we go to this Disneyland or all that, you spend $100, spend 3 hours inside. For 3 hours you are in a different world. You come out, or it's a different make-believe world only when you come out of it. So like that, the human life extending for 100 years can be a kind of extended Disneyland experience, really speaking. Now, it doesn't mean that you become blind to your duties and responsibilities, but this perspective can give a new set of priorities. That's what it implies, really speaking. So that's why in the traditional Vedantic teaching, they give examples only from traditional scriptures. That's a Vedantic teaching can never be in the form of an entertainment. Because if you make an entertainment funny and full of jokes and humor, then you are actually taking you back to the world you want to leave behind. Disneyland can be an example, for even it can be a great educator. Look here, and whole human life is maybe live for 100 years. It is an extended period of 3 hours. 3 hours in Disneyland, 100 years in this world. Same. Both are equally impermanent. changing. Anything that changes is impermanent. So, in real life, even if you are working in Wall Street, if you are a financier engaged in observing the stock markets or whatever it is, still one can remember the fact. See, it's an example. Stock markets collapse, they fluctuate. It's an example of the fluctuating nature of this world, which means there is something which is not fluctuating behind all this. That's the real purpose. If stock markets can collapse, you also can collapse. Your fortunes can collapse. The results of all your actions can collapse. So that can teach us, can direct us to look for something which doesn't collapse, which doesn't fluctuate. So, in a broader sense, but it is not always possible for everyone. Ordinary spiritual seekers need the help of a place that is conducive to spiritual life. You need a calm and quiet place. See, if you live here close to this lake tower, or if you stay here, this may be much more conducive. Nature can also help us in creating the right atmosphere for contemplation. It is possible. For spiritual seekers who are still seeking for higher goals, not achieved the highest goal, they need the cooperation of an appropriate nature, atmosphere, everything. For them, holy company is important, reading scriptures is important, no doubt. You know, Swamiji's quotation we put in the website. Swamiji says even in market streets, standing on market street, seeing all this, you can think of the highest goal, contemplation. That's possible only for those who are already liberated. Those who are still seeking liberation, they will need reading of scriptures. They have to direct their time and energy and efforts in the proper direction, spiritual direction. That's it.
So the other thing is that Vivekachudamani is more directed towards Jnani portion, right?
Yes, yeah.
And whereas Nara's Bhakti Sutra is more directed towards
That's true.
So the states achieved by two are different. Am I right?
At the experience level, they are the same.
Okay.
But the bhakti in its final, ultimate stage of experience is not different from jnana. Shankaracharya himself says in the 13th verse of 10th chapter, the highest jnanam, highest bhakti are the same at the experience level. Conflict only arises when you are not yet reached the goal.
Swamiji, so the human birth, why is it that the devas cannot achieve and they have to become a human to achieve the ultimate goal? Why is that?
Yeah. In fact, the status of devas was reached as a result of human beings who pursued the path of performance of rituals and good deeds with a definite motive and purpose. The elaborate Vedic rituals performed with a strong desire and motive will give you the status of the celestial beings, devas, etc. So, on the other hand, those devas have to be born again and start practicing all their actions without any desire, attain mental purity, chitta shuddhi, and then only they will get the highest liberation, jnana prapti.
And they remain.
No, but they can do it when they are in deva state.
No, they
Why
cannot.
not?
They cannot, because they are all. They have to. And remember that's very important to remember. When we talk about Surga, a Sanskrit word, or heaven in English, there should be one important point to be remembered. Heavens in Judeo-Christian tradition or Islamic tradition is different from what Surga or heaven means in Hindu mythology. In Hindu mythology, heaven is just like a 5-star hotel. You pay fixed amount, and depending on the money you have deposited, you can stay there as long as you want. Depending upon the amount of money you invest, after that you'll be thrown out by the receptionist. That's one thing. So it's a very, very secular, material, worldly achievement. But heaven in Judo-Christian and Islamic tradition is different. It has a spiritual element in it. See, in Christian tradition, for example, heavenly experience means experience in close proximity with God. So heaven is associated with the residence of God in Judo-Christian tradition. But in Vedanta tradition, heaven is a very worldly thing. That's why they was living in the world, in the heaven, had to be born as human beings to continue the spiritual practice. So that's an important point to remember frequently, otherwise it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings. Because in Judo-Christian tradition, heaven has a spiritual association with it, in it. So you find in the Franciscan monasteries in Middle Ages, you talk about some heavenly subjects, means you talk about Jesus, you talk about spiritual things. That's what they mean. So in Vedantic tradition, heavenly means worldly actually.
So Swami, how is it different from Sri Ramakrishna Loka and other things?
Sri Ramakrishna Loka, what Sri Ramakrishna is talking about is those who have reached the highest spiritual realization following the path of Sri Ramakrishna. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is talking. It's not a Deva Loka Sorka. It's the highest spiritual consciousness. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is talking.
So Swami,
Sri Ramakrishna Loka is not mentioned by Sri Ramakrishna.
yeah.
You have to remember, that's an important point. You find this, so we should always remember, as time goes on, different interpreters and teachers will talk about it. And we sometimes build a huge mythological edifice around it, leaving the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna behind. And let us not bother, let us see this, what is Sri Ramakrishna Loka, which he didn't ever talk about. Sri Ramakrishna talked about prayer, meditation, mantra. But what it means is, those who have reached the highest spiritual experience following the path of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. That state of spiritual consciousness is called Sri Ramakrishna Loka. That's as far as I understand from reading books.
Swami, then there are
Yeah, Doctor.
So Swami, in terms of what is reality, so I mean, according to this concept, and it makes sense to me that you can only realize something in this world. So in a way,
Yeah.
this world is the only reality I know. So I mean, I cannot wait till after I die to achieve something. I have to achieve it in this world. So in a way, that is my reality. That is my one opportunity to, or my reality. So it's different from the ultimate reality.
Yeah.
But for me, this life is the only reality. I mean, and because I can't count on doing something after it.
Yeah. Now the point is, we can direct our energies, actions, and give them a spiritual direction only in this world, because we have before reaching the highest experience. Those who reach the highest experience, they will be looking upon this world from a different perspective. So that's what I often mention this point. Set of priorities. You find spiritual life gives us a new set of priorities. So those who don't have any spiritual idea in mind, any spiritual concept in mind, we look upon this world as the only and ultimate thing to be bothered about. For such people, they will have to go through these life cycles many times, and frequently people who consider this world as the only thing to be cared for, they may turn to spiritual life when they get some hard knocks. But hard knocks or unpleasant experiences may not direct everyone to in spiritual direction. For that also, some previous karma, samskara should be there. Then only you will be able to make a turn to spiritual life, even when you get hard blows in this life. So people who get unpleasant experience, they take drugs and drinks and much worse to escape, to run away from the unpleasantness. For those who may have read some higher things, listen to higher things, may suddenly may go back for this higher thing. So maybe previous life or in this life. So essentially it's a matter of priority. There are people for whom this world is real and spiritual values are also real. For such people, when they get hard knocks in this life, they look for spiritual values. I think the number of those who consider this world alone as the only reality and who can never turn to spiritual life will be very few. You can only talk about the Calvin's doctrine of eternal damnation, or Madhvacharyas, India, Dvaita system, dualist philosophy like Madhvacharya, Nitya Naraga Siddhanta, eternal damnation. But there is an aberration in spiritual philosophy. You find in most spiritual traditions there is always an opening for everyone.
What is that Nitya Naraka?
That is Madhvacharya, Dvaita, who opposed Advaita. He believed that there are certain people, certain souls in the world who permanently reside in hell and they can never come out of it. That's what he thought. I mean, even if they try, they cannot. That's, in fact, it's as much an aberration as Calvinistic predetermination, But you can even if you confess, if you turn to Jesus Christ, you consider Jesus the Savior, the only Savior, still no no salvation for them. It's kind of Calvinistic predeterminism. Something, it's an aberration in Christian tradition. And Madhvacharya system is also a terrible aberration in India's philosophical tradition, spiritual tradition.
Swami, one question comes that there are two paths, they say, after that, sun path and the lunar path. Swami.
Yeah.
In sun path, they say you continue, go to the
Yeah.
intermediate and
Yeah.
then you continue.
Yeah.
So, Swami, question, I'm just following on Solace's question. Swami, how is that a person who goes via sun path, he doesn't come back, right, to human form?
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between Devas and that person? Swami?
Yeah. Now, these two paths are mentioned in the Gita and elsewhere. So, one is the path of sun, and the other is the path of this moon. I mean, okay, means. So, one is those who have done a lot of spiritual practices and performed their duties and responsibilities without any selfish motive. They take to higher life. So they go through different levels of consciousness and finally they reach Brahmaloka. At the end of the Kalpa, they become one with Brahman. They get eternally liberated. They become completely liberated. The other ones are those who consider this world as real and performed all their duties and responsibilities with desire. At the same time, with some spiritual interest, they worshipping their own deity, praying to their deity for their worldly pursuit, worldly achievement. Such people, they go through this and finally they are born again as human beings. They go through these cycles, continue moving through these cycles. So, in course of time, sometimes they get some association of great spiritual seekers, and then they get idea of doing all their duties without any desire. They take this karma karma, the purity of mind. They may eventually take to the higher path.
So Devas belong to lunar side of the things?
Yeah, they belong to the earlier cycle. That's an important point. Remember, see, in English we use the word God, God, capital letter G, one singular, it always refers to an anthropomorphic monotheistic God in Hindu tradition. Sometimes Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara also maybe. When small letter G with plural is gods and goddesses, it refers to celestial beings very similar or corresponding to the angels whom you read about in the Judo-Christian traditions. Of course, angels are not supposed to be, they are not born again for liberation. They are always living in the close company of God in Christian tradition. They are agents of God. They are sent here to help you. But in Vedantic tradition, the Deva concept is not a very high concept. So in the Rigveda Samhita you find number of these Devas are mentioned. They are more or less like the gods and goddesses whom you read about in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, where they come down to help both Trojans and also Greeks. And they are fighting, they are jealous, they quarrel, they also they threaten and they tempt you. All do you find in Iliad, so they are not very desirable. You don't want to live with those people in your neighborhood. That's it. That's the status of many of the devas are jealous also. So you find in mythological books, if you take to spiritual life, meditation, japa, the gods are not so amused. They come to take you because they don't want you to reach a status higher than theirs. Because when you become liberated, you go far beyond the status of devas. They don't want like that to happen. So you find in the Puranas and mythological books, you find whenever a spiritual seeker goes to forest and present meditation, some Indra or somebody will send an agent. You can drag him away. So these are mythological stories. You don't give much importance to this.
Swami, the Apsara of Indian mythology is different from angels of Judo-Christian.
They're totally different.
Totally.
Angels in Judo-Christian tradition, they come to help you. You see, in the nativity of Jesus, you find they came and they gave an idea of the glory of Jesus before he was born. So it's very important. Very often in the Hindu mythological stories, you find these gods and goddesses are eagerly watching whether anybody in this world is trying to attain spiritual liberation, so that they will try to drag them back. You find such stories. This is a very important point to remember, because if you don't mention this, very often you when you read scriptures or scriptural statements condemning heaven, you may misunderstand. So heaven in Vedanta scripture is not a very desirable place. It is not a very high status. There is no spiritual aspect about it. This is an important point to remember. Some in Devas and Devatas help you, some of them do not. So Rigveda Samhita, you find many of these Devas are mentioned. More or less they are like the angels or Devas, gods, small letter gods and goddesses mentioned in the Homer's Iliad. Right.
So Swami, if
you mentioned when holy ones are alive, they generate a vibration,
Yeah.
and that lives after they die,
Yeah.
physically die.
Excuse
What
me, excuse me.
about the
Can you
vibration?
repeat once more the last?
You mentioned that when the holy ones are living on the earth, they generate vibrations
Yeah.
which are accessible
Yeah.
after they die physically. But
Yeah.
what about, can you talk about the vibrations that they are emanating continuously even after they go out of the
Yeah,
body?
yeah.
Can you discuss that?
Yeah, I'll come to that. You know what, you see, all the great pilgrim centers, or what we consider as holy places, are examples of this. If you have some interest in spiritual life, if you go there, if you visit those places, if you meditate in those places, you feel the atmosphere helps you to meditate better. Or if you are interested in reading scriptures, the atmosphere helps you to read holy scriptures with greater concentration. If you have little interest in spiritual life, it increases. If you have a lot of interest in spiritual life, then it still helps you, still go beyond, further, it increases. It helps you to accumulate more and more spiritual vibrations within your own system. The greatest example, illustration, is the example of holy places, where holy men and women had lived and meditated and done spiritual practices. Now, thoughts create vibrations. Words create vibrations. Physical proximity of persons who emit holy thoughts and holy vibrations also will generate spiritual vibrations. If we have some interest, it's just like opening our mental system to this, welcoming these spiritual vibrations into our system. So that's a very, very important point. It cannot be demonstrated in a laboratory, but it is much more intensely felt than anything that you can demonstrate in a laboratory of science and technology.
But Swamiji, I wanted to ask you, so after they die physically, how is the vibration that they're continuing to emanate? How is it different from...
Their vibrations are not physical. Vibrations remain independent of the physical existence.
So it's continuing to
be
generated?
It continues. The thought vibrations continue. See, the physical aspect of those personalities is only very insignificant part of their total personality. The physical element, see, physically, so far as physical personality is concerned, there is not a great difference between the personality of an evil person and the personality of a Buddha. Same food, same skin. I mean, more or less the metabolism, all the cells, blood, marrow, bones, skin, everything the same. Where is the difference? The difference is the manifestation of the Atman, the soul, in their system, mental system. That is totally non-physical, or rather, it transcends the physical. It's much more powerful. Otherwise, physically, what difference is there between a Buddha and a Hitler? No difference. But the thoughts, the words, the meditation, the contemplation of a great Buddha, it continues to be a blessing to the whole world. Those who are interested in spiritual life, those who have some interest in spiritual ideas, when they read a book, Buddha or Shankaracharya, Sri Ramakrishna or Jesus, they get benefited. Where does it come from? It comes from another source. It's spread all over the world. When we practice spiritual practice, when we do spiritual practices, we are activating our mechanism within us, and we are opening that mechanism, and immediately those vibrations enter. That's why you are able to meditate much better in a place where the spiritual vibrations are very strong, because these vibrations help you in removing the obstacles that could emerge when you try to meditate. So, the beginning, for example, a spiritual seeker who is just a beginner, he won't be able to meditate in Market Street. But a Buddha or a Sri Ramakrishna or Shankaracharya can come there and meditate, Vivekachudamani. Because even there, their mind is not affected by that. But ordinary spiritual seekers, their mind could be affected by a negative atmosphere. And their mind could be positively helped by a positive atmosphere. So, for beginners, very often when they try to meditate, lot of conflicting thoughts, negative thoughts, a lot of obstacles in the form of negative thought currents could emerge. So you will be able to meditate. You feel a lot of conflicts. You feel disturbance. On the other hand, if you go to holy place, those negative thought currents will subside, or they will be much less, because the power of the positive thought currents or vibrations prevailing there will help you in acting against the negative thought currents. So they subside.
So Swami, a place that has a lot of negative vibrations, when do these disappear? Do the positive vibrations of, for instance, holy people, they linger and they're added, I think, by people, I would imagine, people who come to meditate who are sincere, they add to this positivity. So then on the negative side,
They will be neutralized.
I'm sorry?
Negative thought currents, negative thought currents and vibrations will be weakened or neutralized by the presence of positive thought currents when you do spiritual practices in those places.
Okay, so that is what it would take in order to more or less dissipate those
Yeah,
negative
exactly.
vibrations.
I know a Vedanta center in Europe, which I don't want to mention because I don't want to mention, where a Jewish family lived during the Holocaust in 1904, and during the time of the French occupation by the Nazis, and their whole family was removed and slaughtered and taken away to southern France. And that place happened to later became the home of Vedanta, one of the Vedanta centers in Europe, and they still do some chanting and all that to neutralize or weaken the negative vibrations that they may have generated, because when they suffered a lot, when they were being dragged away from the So very often negative vibrations can be weakened or neutralized and totally overcome by prayers, meditation, reading of scriptures, or meditate by some great holy persons living. You remember, in Sri Ramakrishna's life, one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples he went to a place which was supposedly associated with the presence of a ghost. And Sri Ramakrishna helped that person to come out a story ghost. So the point is, when these living beings who had suffered a lot and the premature death, the physical body is gone, so the subtle body in the form of thought currents, ideas, all will be present there. So that presence will create an uneasy feeling for those who happen to go to those places. So spiritual practices, reading of scriptures, chanting of holy mantras, all will help you to neutralize, weaken and eventually completely neutralize the negative vibrations. That's what happens.
But isn't this a descent into dualism? I mean, in a sense, so there are negative and positive forces, but isn't it a matter of it's individual person's attitude? I mean, if there are negative and positive, what am I receptive to?
You can remember in Sri Ramakrishna's life, Sri Ramakrishna was very particular that Swami Brahmanandaji, Rakhal Maharaj, should not eat fruits and other offerings brought by people who were perhaps of a different background, because those things had the influence negative vibrations for us. But Sri Ramakrishna didn't mind when Swamiji ate it. So those who have reached Advaitic realization, they will be able to look upon everything as Brahman. But those who have Bhakti tradition, that Bhakti when it reaches the highest point, then there will be no difference. But perhaps at that time Rakhal Maharaj was still going through some higher Bhakti sadhanas. So Sri Ramakrishna perhaps must have felt he had to wait for. But the same same Brahmanandaji, after Sri Ramakrishna was passing away, went to Benares ashrama. There were some difficulties and his presence solved the problem.
But it's a matter of us accepting that there are bad places and good places.
That's true.
Being careful what we do and what we listen to.
At the time of sadhana, and when we are
Yeah,
when you are
yeah,
still
We-
going through the period of practicing, progressing, evolving, at that time you have to be careful
Yeah.
with whom we associate and what places you visit, what you read is very important. After reaching the highest goal, when we look upon the whole everything as God in Bhakti tradition, everything is Brahman in Vedantic tradition, Advaita tradition, will be no problem. But remember one thing, the problem is very often we mistake a concept for an experience. So frequently, if everything is Brahman, then I can do whatever I want. So that problem is there. That's a serious problem actually. So very often when we interpret Advaita, this frequently becomes a problem. If everything is Brahman, then we were thinking, well, okay, then nothing to do practically. I am Brahman, you are Brahman, everything is Brahman. But it is only an idea or a concept. In fact, right, our mind has not reached that level. Frequently, we may conveniently think that what we appreciate is a matter of our experience. It's not always so. We have to go a long way to reach the experience level of our concept. So we'll discuss this discussion can continue later. Already time is up, you know.
So small tree needs a good
Yeah.
fence around.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, that's right. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll continue this interesting discussion.
Young sapling needs a strong
Om
tree.
Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
Street, yeah.